Meeting will come to order. Good evening and welcome to the February 21st, 2012 regular meeting of the Mercer Island City Council. Tammy, could you call a roll?
Councilmember Debbie Bertlin. Here. Councilmember Jane Baum. Here. Councilmember Mike Ciro. Councilmember Mike Grady. Here. Councilmember Tana Sen. Here. Deputy Mayor Dan Grouse. Here. Mayor Bruce Bassett.
Here. Thank you. And I am I'm sure that some of you will share my sense of pain at hearing it, but Councilmember Ciro called me a little while ago to report that he would not be here because he was drinking umbrella drinks by the pool in Maui. Yes. So he said he sends his regrets, but he is not here this evening. So, yes. Okay, we will have two things that I want to just mention right now. The first is that there will be appearances in just a moment, and we will also have an opportunity for folks to speak if they choose during Agenda Bill 4708. If you wish to speak about the parking on the Mercers. So the first moment will be appearances for anybody who wishes to speak on anything at all, or to speak on the parking on the Mercers if you so choose, and then the second opportunity will be later in the evening just for parking on the Mercers. Second point is we have added an agenda bill at fairly last minute, and that will be Agenda Bill 4709. It will come after the other regular business that's on the calendar. Council members have been given that agenda bill via email earlier today. So with that, we'll go to public appearances, and it's a time where you may speak on any issue you wish to speak on. The rules of engagement are please speak audibly into the microphone. Please state your name and address when you begin. What else? Limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. I'll cut you off at the 3-minute mark. And please don't be put off by the fact that we don't engage you in conversation. The policy is that we will sit quietly, take notes, and if it's appropriate, we'll have staff contact you afterward. So with that, we're open for public appearances.
Sir, I understood your point. You can speak now, or you're going to have another opportunity when you're going to speak about parking specifically?
Yes, you can do it whichever suits you, now or in a few minutes when we get to that agenda bill. So it's at your pleasure.
Does it make any difference to you?
No, it doesn't. It really is whatever you'd like. So welcome.
Thank you. My name is Richard Fay, and my wife Maud and I live at 7414 East Mercer Way, and we're here to speak about the Roadside Shoulder Development Program. Our residence was completed about 10 years ago. The city permitted a single-lane driveway to serve 5 homes in the 7400 block of East Mercer Way, about 200 feet long. The overflow and service parking on the west side of Mercer, East Mercer, has been a way of life for the last 10 years. Never contemplated then, and even today, that we would lose this amenity. We have limited parking at our residence, both personal and service. No trucks can use our driveway. It's very short and very steep. As the residence was in development, we moved the foundation 20 feet west to save a 100-year-old sequoia tree with an eagle's nest, which shortened the driveway and increased the slope dramatically. Our neighbors have slightly different challenges. Now we're at risk. As I mentioned, this past week we received a notice about a parking ordinance that will impact our neighborhood and our personal lives dramatically. We have limited information about how you will accommodate Mercer Island residents who have special parking needs. There's a reference to exceptions for severe weather conditions and holiday parties. But what about our gardeners and our family members, to mention only 2 of our visitors who have used paved shoulder parking on a regular basis for the last 10 years? We are opposed to the resolution as we understand it. But we also make 4 recommendations if you're going to proceed in moving forward with the parking ordinance. First, eliminate the 2 blocks of East Mercer from 72nd to 74th in the initial ordinance until you complete the paved shoulder program. No one uses this except the neighbors for overflow parking and has no benefit or implications for the cyclists or the pedestrians. It's a minor footnote in the overall plan. Second, as you formalize your regulations for parking on the shoulder, please take into consideration the many special needs of the islanders. Holiday parties and severe weather are only two. Many of the residents will have requirements to use shoulders on a regular basis. Gardening, construction work, delivery services, family, friends, et al. The list is endless. Third, consider an alternative to your dusk to dawn restrictions. Restrict parking during heavy traffic hours, for example, 6 to 9 in the morning, 3 to 6 in the afternoon. If you have fixed times, most folks will be able to schedule around them. Fourth, please design a permitting process that will facilitate paved shoulder parking on an as-need basis. I can't imagine calling City Hall every time we need to schedule a service truck or a family member to park on East Mercer Way and then have the city notify the police department that we have an exemption from the parking ordinance. Finally, my wife and I love to walk, and we walk in a separate lane for pedestrians on Mercer Way, but we cannot imagine how it would be used by the cyclists. If you live on Mercer Way, you often see cyclists in groups of 10 or more occupying an entire single lane of traffic, 2 or 3 abreast. We are told by a biker friend that 99% of the cyclists never ride on the shoulders. The pavement is uneven, full of debris, and there are a number of sewer drains on the pathway. He described it as more suitable for pedestrians than bikers. If you want the cyclists to use the paved shoulders, you will have to write another ordinance mandating that they actually ride on the shoulders, and you're going to have to mandate that they travel around the island clockwise, because the only way they'll have the benefit of the shoulder is to travel clockwise around the island. Otherwise, you have traffic going both ways. And the shoulder will not accommodate two-way bike traffic. So we're optimistic that you will give this matter and our recommendations careful consideration for the benefit of the Mercer Island residents and their continued use and enjoyment of their properties. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Baron Dickey. I live at 6809 96th Avenue Southeast, Mercer Island. First of all, I do not understand what brought the council to consider such an ordinance, but I do not think it wise or in the best interest of the city or of the property owners. Restricting parking on Mercer Way, north, east, west, may be more impactful to the council than you've considered. There are many properties adjoining Mercer Way, the Mercer Ways, that do not front on Mercer Way, which would also be severely impacted. Some of the impacts are needed parking in times of construction, which has been mentioned, during times of remodeling, frequently impacts many homes, not just the house under construction, during times of street repair, during times of inclement weather, which has been mentioned. That becomes a real safety issue for a lot of people. I would also bring to the attention of the council that that these property owners are involved. Many are involved in philanthropic activities in which they allow their homes to be used for events, which are of great value to the community. And restricting parking on Mercer Way would make these events impossible or impractical. The properties impacted are some of the most valuable properties on Mercer Island, and anything which would reduce their value would impact not only the property owners, but the city and the county in terms of taxes. I would also bring to the attention of the council that such a restriction was not in place at the time these properties were purchased, and even the most diligent research would not have anticipated such a restriction, and some may consider this a taking by the city. Last but certainly not least, I would bring to your attention the fact that many people on adjacent streets park both morning and afternoon on the Mercer Ways to get their children to and from school bus stops located on the Mercer Ways. This is a child safety issue and must be of utmost consideration. I do not know what the motivation for considering this ordinance, but I believe the first responsibility of the City Council is to the property owners of Mercer Island, and I ask you to abandon this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Welcome.
Hi.
You can pull that microphone down.
I think I'll need to, oh, it works. Okay. I'm Joy Matsuura. I'm at 7264 West Mercer Way. I don't think that my husband and I are specifically affected by this parking policy, but I do still wish to comment on the proposed dawn to dusk no parking policy for the Mercer Ways. It sounds to me as if you've paved the shoulders just to facilitate bicycle traffic by making an unofficial bike lane, and then surprise found that when you've added the space that people park their cars there. So now you're annoyed because you didn't intend to help out the people who live in the area by adding parking. You only want to help bicyclists or maybe some pedestrians. And public roads shouldn't work this way. What you're ignoring is that if people are parking in the new paved areas, then it probably means that there is a need for parking there. Off the Mercer Ways, there are a lot of shared driveways, as the other people have mentioned, and narrow lanes which can be blocked for any of a number of reasons. Utility trucks, PSC, Comcast, Quest, delivery trucks, construction, moving vans, tree trimmers, inconsiderate neighbors. Sometimes people may park on the street because the drive is blocked, and they might not be around to move their car later when the obstruction is clear. And that doesn't seem to be a justifiable reason to give somebody a ticket. The policy, I think, will probably be implemented, not because it's a good idea, but because most people won't care because they're not going to be affected by it, or they think they won't be affected by it. Only the people on the Mercer Ways will be affected, and of those, the ones that have big driveways and plenty of off-street parking might actually prefer it if nobody parks on the street because, it's always easier when there's no cars there. But if you made the whole island no parking dawn to dusk, then I think more people would notice and really think about what you're talking about. And then they might realize that this changeable time situation is hard to keep track of. If people think they can park there after work and then move their car on their way to work, well, we have to remember that in the summer, morning comes around 4:30 a.m. And it doesn't get dark till 10. So unless you work really long hours, you're not really going to be able to take advantage of that. And on rainy days versus sunny days, the time when it gets dark changes. So if you're planning a party, look at the calendar and the weather report to know if your guests are going to be able to park on the street. And you could then say, okay, well, this is to help bicyclists, so maybe we'll have a parking is okay on rainy days policy. Because, I don't see a lot of bicyclists and pedestrians on cold, rainy days in December. But if parking creates a hazard, then designate the area no parking. If you want to restrict parking, then make it easy for everyone and use set times. And the Mercer Ways are not a planned community like the lakes. One reason people bought onto the island is for the relaxed rural atmosphere.
I'll ask you to wrap up, please.
Yeah. And if you're going to instill an unfriendly policy like this, do it when the market's good so that people that are unhappy can sell their homes and move.
Thank you. No need to write your name down. Just step on up.
Okay. My name is Jim Toharzadeh. I live in 7239 East Mercer Way. And I just was given a note by my neighbor, Richard Ferry, I think he just taught. And I was totally shocked at such an irrationality of this decision. And you guys, I'm a civil engineer, for your first job is to make a road, make a sidewalk for children to walk, rather than make a road, make a path for the bicyclist. That's not the path for the city. Your job is to provide a sidewalk so I can take my kids, go to the lake, instead of being afraid to be hit all the time. And now you're making it more dangerous for me to walk on the shore that I used to walk because you're forcing the bicyclists to walk over there. That means forget it. Forget about walking on the shoulder at all. Why don't we just buy all those properties on lakeside and call it Green Lake and put the sign up for bicyclists and rollerbladers and others. Like somebody says, the value of the property is going to go down. I can't have a party in my property because bicyclists you want to force the bicyclists, make it safe, so we just imprison in our house. So we can go to somebody else's house, but nobody can come to our house? This is totally ridiculous. Don't know what is the common sense. You guys live here? Any of you live on any of the East or Mercer or whatever, one of these Mercer ways? I mean, if I knew that this was here, I bought the property in 2007. I lived here in apartment and other places since 1979. I thought this is a reasonable place to live. That's why I came back to live in here. And when I look at this, I said, somebody didn't really think about this. This is just not common sense. You got to have common sense. This is totally, you're going to find a lot of people going after the city. If you do this, it's going to devalue. And I'm not going to stop sitting there and you devalue. If you want to devalue my property, then you're going to buy my property. You're not just going to stop me from parking on the street like any civilized city does. I'm totally upset about this. It's better not pass.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello. My name is Richard Berquist, and I live at 7244 East Mercer Way down the south end of the island. You know that the road on the south end of the island is sort of the road to nowhere. It's not supposed to be a racetrack for bicyclists. You know, like the bridge to nowhere, well, that's the road to nowhere. Nobody really has to go down there except for the people who live there. It's our only access to it. You know, if you take away our private property rights, use our adjacent properties in a reasonable fashion by putting this ridiculous ordinance together, then put it on your own self. Every one of you, on your own neighborhood, in your neighborhood, you should have to do the same thing. Yes. It's just really ridiculous to put it on some. And these properties are the most highly valuable on all Mercer Island. And now you'll want to have a tax increase to try to develop that and tax us for something we don't need. We need this kind of thing like a frog needs a frying pan. I mean, it's just not true. It's not needed. We don't get from the city, a survey of people. Anybody really want this? Do you actually ask anybody? No. You come up here and you decide you're going to do something, and then you force it on us, and then raise our taxes to pay for it. And you devalue our property, just like he said. You make it hard to have us to have the charitable things, and I do a lot. I do a lot with Scouts, and everybody knows it. I still do a lot of stuff. I can't have a party and have people and then park in the park some blocks away and do whatever. How would you like it if you had to do that? I ask you to reconsider this in a strong fashion. Turn it down. You have millions to spend now or want to for new schools or the new garage. The taxes that I spend right now eat every single cent of my Social Security. All of it. I challenge any of you to have to do that. You think that's fair? I don't want this thing. I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to be inconvenienced by it. I want the quiet enjoyment of my residential street just the same as you do in yours. So restore it and keep it back and let me have my own. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak?
Another note I want to
sorry, just one crack at it at a time. So,
any note
as I say, it's public comments kind of limited in the sense that it's a 3-minute slice of time, and we ask that you do. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. With that, I'm going to close public appearances, and we'll move on to the minutes of our February 6th meeting.
Move to approve the minutes.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Minutes are approved. Moving on to the consent calendar. We have the payables, payroll, Agenda Bill 4703 and Agenda Bill 4705. And personally, I just would like to have a brief discussion about Agenda Bill 4705, so I'm going to ask that come off. Anybody for anything else? All right. All those in favor of the consent calendar as modified, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No. Bruce, I do have a question, though. Rich, I sent you some emails on the payables. I have not checked that account for 4 days.
I'd be happy to answer your questions.
No, just, did you send me emails answering?
No, I actually sent you a voicemail.
Oh.
I called you. I left a message on your phone. Maybe we can talk after the meeting's done.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor
All right.
Bassett, we need a motion first.
Second. Just no, I'm in charge here. All right, Ally, help me back up. What do I have to do?
We need someone to make a motion to approve the
All
consent
right, I'm
calendar.
looking for a motion to approve the consent
Motion to
calendar.
approve the consent calendar.
Second.
You like us doing date
Thank you. Yes, please. All right, we're going to try that vote again. So, all in favor of approving the consent calendar as moved by Mr. Grady?
Aye.
Please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes. Let's see, what can I flub next? Well, let's go on to Agenda Bill 4705, which will be our first order of regular business, and that is Sub-Basin 6 Watercourse Stabilization Project closeout. And I've only pulled it off because I was hoping, Fred, you could come and give us just a quick summary of how that went. In particular, I'd asked about the knotweed removal, and it looks like you guys were successful in that. And I was
Yes.
hoping you could expand
Okay.
a little bit on how that all
Actually,
went.
with the help of Parks, just to introduce myself, Fred Gu, CIP project manager, have been doing watercourse stabilization project for the city for the past 3 or 4 years. The knotweed, yes, with the help of Parks and Recreations, they have a crew of staff that specifically do that kind of things and more around the islands. And I was able to tap into their talents, and with their help, they were able to eradicate all the knotweed from Southeast 40th north all the way to I-90. We focus on a 50-foot wide corridor on the center of the watercourse. Anything beyond that, we have to judge by our naked eyes. So we did our site inspections, field inspections, apply the chemicals before construction start, actually, so that we had time to let the knotweed to die off before we actually grab them. So we prevented the knotweed from breaking and spawning again. So that's what we did during the summer. So,
Excellent.
yes.
And go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Bruce. Fred, can you tell me how you applied the,
By spraying, there's a chemical. The brand name is Aqua Master, and it's a water-based weed killer that is widely acceptable for killing such species.
how close to the water course did you come with the aerial application?
As I remember, they were using spray bottles with a long hose. So, to answer your question, they were spraying very close to the plant. They were not standing like 10 feet away and just do that. No.
No, I only ask, we've worked with Kent County on similar projects, and when you're particularly close to the water, they'll take out a syringe and apply it.
Oh, no. That is a method that we reserve to use on larger plants. The one we have found are not that huge. So,
Very good. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions for Fred? No? Okay, well, thank you. It's a project that came in under budget and got the extra work done, which is excellent, so thank you very much. Okay, anybody care to make a motion about Agenda Bill 4705?
I'll move to accept the completed Sub-Basin 6 Watercourse Stabilization Project and authorize staff to close out the project.
Second.
Comments? Discussion? No? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Okay, that
Nice job, Fred.
completed. Yeah, indeed. All right, we move on to Agenda Bill 4704, First Hill Water System Improvements Construction Bid Award.
Project manager Ron Lynn will ask Mike to actually bring it up on the screen. Originally, the staff had sort of identified this to be a consent calendar item, and I guess I decided to bring it onto regular business for two reasons. One, it's a big water system project bigger than most that we take on, and in fact, the bid amount's a large amount by our standards. And we had such good success in phase 1 of this on the pump station. I wanted Rona to get a little airtime about phase 2. So go ahead, Rona. And Rona, you need to be at the microphone. Yes.
For water system improvement at the first hill has been on our radar screen for several years. Ever since I joined the city in 2003, every round of the fire flow analysis has indicated that we have fire flow deficiencies in the area. On top of that, the water main providing the domestic water supply are undersized and aging. So obviously it took us a little while to get here. And the reason are, first of all, we have our system ranking method to prioritize the water system improvement. And then secondly, the area is large and the system is complex. We have a gravity line and then a pump line. So, you know, it's a little tricky to figure out how we can make the improvement, the changes to the system. And then lastly was the funding. So we had break up the project into 3 phases. And on the slide you'll see the first phase we did was in 2009. We did the water system improvement on 72nd Avenue between Southeast 24th and Southeast 32nd. And I'll give you the little bit detail on the next slide. The second phase we finished last year was the booster pump station upgrade. We just recently finished that in December. And the third and final phase is the one that we're coming to you tonight. It's for the remaining First Hill water system improvement. Oh, sorry. I don't do this very often.
Go down the next one.
The first phase, we replaced the water main on 72nd, and we also installed new fire hydrants, and we replaced 74 water services. And the second phase we did last year, the booster pump station upgrade. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned previously, because the system is complex. We have 2 systems through the First Hill. The fire line was fed by a gravity line, and in order to increase the fire flow, we actually have to increase the capacity of the booster pump station, and we connect the fire hydrant to the system that would be fed by the pump station. And so that was important. We had this second phase. We were able to utilize the existing system. We didn't have to build a new one, but we replaced the pumps, the piping, the new control system, and we did the electrical upgrade. And the phase, the last phase that we will be starting construction soon, if awarded the contract tonight, is to replace roughly 3,500 linear feet of water main. And we also are going to be able to reuse just about same linear feet of existing water main to convert it from gravity line into pump line. So it was a a very significant cost saving on that. We are also going to replace roughly over 140 water services, new hydrants, and quite a few water main connections. So
When you say new water services, that's between the pipe and the residence? Is that
yes, it's between the water main and the meter.
meter? Isn't that normally the responsibility of the resident, or is that?
That's the part that's the city's
That's part-
responsibility. The
We get
residents
to
part.
the meter, and from the meter to the house is the responsibility of the property owner.
Okay.
Right. And so here, just a couple of pictures to share with you on the 72nd project and the pump station before and after construction. And with that, I just like to see if you have any questions.
Before you go to questions, I guess I would observe, stepping back from, on step or two, this is about $2.5 million worth of investment in First Hill water system when you go from Phase 1 to Phase 3. Basically what we've done, and this is, in my experience, really the first time we've really done this, we've replumbed a neighborhood, or largely replumbed the neighborhood. It's one of our older neighborhoods. The mains were undersized. Our fire flow mains weren't big enough and without enough pressure to meet our own standard for delivery of water at the hydrant to a fire. So the staff several years ago said, we finally got to bite the bullet and get First Hill done. We need to do it right. The way you do these things right is you go in at each step and you go do the infrastructure that's underground and you take care of it so that when you pave the street, when it's done, you don't have to dig it up again. So we got great bids this time around for Phase 3. I fully expect we'll be able to implement it within the budget, and we can feel proud that we actually did go in and replumb First Hill, and we won't have to do that, I hope, again for another 30, 40 years, 50 years. No.
Okay. Mike?
Rona, I was trying to recollect when you came on, and you answered my question already, and that was 2003. But I do want to reiterate, I was on the utility board not long after you came on, and we were having these very discussions, particularly about fire flow. So it's not a question because you've already answered it, but thank you for doing the hard work on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dan?
Are you going to talk separately about the successful bidder part of this thing, or is that just what's in the agenda bill on that?
I think it's in the agenda bill.
So I noticed that the low bidder is the same company which completed the pump station project itself. Have we? I don't think we've closed out that project yet, have we?
We have not. We have yet to bring that to project closeout in the next, I would say, probably in a month or so.
Can you tell us already where we're going to stand vis-a-vis the budget on that project? How they performed?
Budget-wise, you mean?
Well, what was your assessment of how they performed, both financially and otherwise?
It was a really good experience working with them. I know they've done work for us several years ago, but it was my first project working with them. I would say they really tried their hardest to make everything work. Budget-wise, we are within our budget.
How much of the contingency do you think we're going to end up using?
I don't have it with me. We didn't use too much of the contingencies. I can't recall right now if it's...
As I recall, Rona, when we made a change order that added another street hookup, and we were able to do that within the contingency, so we didn't have to increase the project budget. So
Right.
I think you're aware of the change order I'm talking
I'm aware
about.
of that change order, yes.
So, and that was very near the end of the project.
Right, it was.
Now, my only concern about this is, just to put this in context, I live a block from where this whole pump station project occurred. And unless I'm mistaken, they were about 2 months late on finishing that project. from what they originally told everyone as to when it was going to be done to when it was actually going to be done. And the explanation given, at least to the people in the area, was that they ended up having to order parts which they couldn't get on a they couldn't readily get, and so that they had a whole bunch of delays, which, given that they were able to put a metal plate over that every night, it was no big deal, and I'm not saying the neighborhood suffered, but I am concerned that if that kind of performance is repeated on this project, it could have a significant impact onto people on First Hill, because you're now ripping up a lot of streets in laying down these pipes. And obviously I defer to your better judgment, but I would hope that there is language in this, whatever contract we have with them, which will not put us in a situation where we could end up with huge delays and huge impacts on First Hill, which you're familiar with what happened on the pump station.
Yes,
it took a very long time to get that done.
Yes, and I would say the pump station project is really a unique project. We've done several water system improvement in the past few years, but the pump station and the reason for the delay, it's the changes to the pumping system, and it's related to the utility conflict outside the station. Every bit of conflict they come across, they have to go back and redesign the pumps because they're just so limited space, and little change on the piping, the header pipes, it affects. So it's kind of the fittings. One point it went outside the station, and then one after change, they had to move it back in. So they were, and the shop drawing on the pumping system started from revision A, and the end it was in revision F. It was just several change, and they're minor, but until we approve the final revision, they can't go to production. And I recall, yes, there were times that it seems like they were not working because they were waiting for the equipment to arrive. And there were, at that point in time, there was just nothing we can do but wait. But I wouldn't say that was a reflection to the quality of work they perform. It was just a unique situation that, we want to do it right, and we have to make that change. And I can't speak for them for this project, but from working with them, I would say they really do their best trying to do the work right.
Rona, in comparing the two projects last year to what's coming up, is what we're about to do a little more straightforward in its complexity? And the mains, it's water main replacement work.
It is, although it is complicated just because we have dual systems and we're converting one water main from gravity line to pump line. But I was really pleased to see them. They actually already called me and coming before the bid award. They say, "Can we come in to talk to you? We want to know more about the project, how we can lay out our work sequence." So they already planning, putting a lot of thoughts into it.
Okay. Other questions for Rona?
I guess I'd ask, have we spoken, I imagine, to Tukwila and Auburn about their experiences with their projects, their recent experiences?
I have called a couple of their references, yes.
And the results were happy?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Bring it back to council then for any, thank you very much, Rona. Bring it back to council for any discussion or a motion.
I move that we award the First Hill Water System Improvements Project to R.L. Alia Company in the amount of $759,011.95. Set the total project budget at $1,269,100. $1,269,195, and direct the city manager to execute the construction contract.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Don't leave us, Dan. Okay, with no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Motion passes. 5 and 1, and I don't know what that is. Rona, thank you very much for coming and giving that presentation. Appreciate that. Okay, we move now to Agenda Bill 4708, and this is titled Public Hearing Ordinance Regulating Parking on the Mercer Ways. We've heard from several people during public appearances, and I see Katie already here, fired up, ready to go. We are going to have further appearances. Is the theory that you'll speak first, and then we'll open it back up again?
Actually, why don't you have the appearances first, and then I can come back.
Okay, very good. So with this, to you who have spoken already, we're not entirely swayed by repeats of testimony, but if you have something more to say, and I know, sir, that you did, if you'd like to step back up and say that, you may. And if anybody else has something they'd like to say, they're welcome to do that at this time as well. So
I just wanted to add that I did not get any notification about this till yesterday when my neighbor put something in my dropped something in my mail, so there would be probably more people here talking against this ordinance. And so, if you're planning to pass this, I would say back off and send the letters to people so everybody knows that this ordinance, ridiculous ordinance, is planning to be passed here in this city. And that's all I want to add.
thank you. And did we get his address to just be able to confirm?
Let's make sure we do get your address. And Glenn, maybe you could real quickly, if you'd step up, just say how and where we sent letters to, just generalize, so at least for the record, anybody that's watching would also know how we sent letters.
Yeah, thanks. Glenn Betker, City Manager, and I may need Ann to help, but through the GIS system, we tried to capture everyone who accesses, either is directly on east or west or north Mercer, or accesses or has a vital connection. And we sent out 1,400, or sent out letters to 1,400 homes.
Thank you.
And some number of contractors.
100, roughly 100, 110 contractors, right?
I didn't get it, and another neighbor said that he contacted another one neighbor that didn't get it.
All right, so if you could just give your address to Glenn, and just so he's got that, that would be great. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak this time?
May I just speak on this one subject?
If you'd like to, you may, but please step to the microphone so that you're...
Just to follow up on this point, there are 1,100 homes on the water, and if you multiply that times the number of homes that are between Mercer and the water and going to the hillside or to the water, you've got to increase it by more than 300 homes. If you only sent notices to 1,400 homes, you could not have covered people that are being impacted by this ordinance. Just couldn't happen because there are 1,100 homes on the water. If you go around the island, that's what I'm told from the work that was done here on the
shoreline.
So if you think about that, if you have 1,100 homes on the water, you've got homes above the Mercer and you've got homes below Mercer. You've got more than 300 homes that would have to be covered in a mailing. So I just mentioned that as something to consider.
Thank you.
I don't think it's going to be one or two.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak? Step up.
Hi, my name is Mihai Saru. I live a couple of blocks from here, and I commute with my bicycle to South Mercer. I had a couple of bike accidents, so safety is important for me. So having this trail cleaned up a little bit with more access from the shoulder would be important for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, close the public hearing then, and Katie, you're up.
Good evening, council. This is Mr. City Manager. Katie Knight, your city attorney, and I will be brief. The City Council has made the decision to implement no parking between dawn and dusk along the Mercer Ways. Part of the implementation of this requires an authorizing ordinance, which I prepared for you and which is on for first reading tonight. You'll note that we wrote that this was a violation to park in the following areas between dawn or dusk or as otherwise posted, because there's a few places which are posted otherwise. I think that's described within the body of the agenda bill. And very simply put, it addresses the definition of dawn to dusk, which is not addressed in state law. I actually just took hours of darkness, which is addressed in state law, and flipped it. So that's where we'll go get our balance for what is dawn and what is dusk. Finally, this is set for second reading on March 5th. If the council chooses to pass it, then at that point in time, there'll be a 30-day period of time before it becomes effective. Then the city police will put in a 2-week grace period where people will get used to the ordinance and understanding that that's present. That'll be after the signs are posted. And at that point in time, it will start to be placed into the parking system with our PSO, our public safety officer.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Questions for Katie or, I don't know, anyone else? Ann? Yeah.
I have
Ann, did you have anything you wanted to say? Okay. So questions for Katie or Ann?
Just,
No?
you made the comment that it'd be enforced by the PSO. If I, in the prior discussions, that in prior testimony that the chief gave, I think he alluded to the fact that it would be enforced by all the police department if necessary.
It would be all the police department, but our PSO has certain areas that she covers, that correct? And so I was alluding to the fact that she would put that on her books as part of the areas that she covers, but all the police officers in the city would enforce it. They all enforce all the parking, but she has a particular route.
Okay. I've got one. I think, Ann, it's probably for you if you would. So we heard from, I think it was Mr. Ferry, and forgive me if I've got your name wrong there, about a stretch of shoulder that has existed for 10-plus years, and that is presumably falling under the scope of this. But do you know anything about that stretch of road? I think he described it as 72nd to 74th on East Mercer Way. And can you, if you don't know about it, I guess I would just ask that we find out a little bit more about what the situation is there.
I don't know the history of when it was installed or why it was installed. I quickly checked with our street engineer. He seems to recall that it was there originally, not quite sure how or why it was paved, but it is a paved shoulder. It is on towards the south end of the island, between the blocks of 7200 and 7400, give or take, and it's sort of a standalone, not connected to any of the other paved shoulders that we have recently completed. So it's not a contiguous section. It's a good length of paved area, but it's not connected to the paved shoulders to the north. So it is included as part of this ordinance because it is a paved shoulder, and it would serve the purpose of providing an area for bicyclists or pedestrians to get off of the roadway if they needed to or wanted to.
I believe that's the stretch that goes down the hill, if I'm not mistaken, that sort of steep hill that goes down from East Mercer down to the south end. Yeah. That's, if I recall correctly.
It's 2 blocks down the hill.
Yeah, but it's down that steep hill.
Yeah.
And do we have a fog line on that stretch or not?
Yes, we do. It's actually recently rebuttoned. But there is a defining line between the shoulder and the roadway.
Okay.
I don't think so.
There is no...
There's lines.
So just as a matter of course, we're back at council member discussions, and so I do have to ask you not to participate in the discussion at this point. Forgive me for that. I understand there's a great temptation to participate. We'll call on you as it strikes us that's the appropriate thing to do. Debbie.
Zone? No. School bus, I'm assuming
School bus, yeah.
No, we have not.
I would be very interested to know where the school bus stops fall within this proposed no parking zone.
Other questions? Mike?
I asked a question that's tangential to the ordinance. It has to do with the signs. Do we have templates for the signs yet?
No. I think there was an example of what was being proposed in the last agenda bill, the last time we met. I don't think I've changed that in any way, but the thinking is no parking on pavement, the standard 12 inches by 18 inches, so they're not very big, red lettering on a white background, and then a separate single plaque, probably would be 6 inches by 12 inches across, that would read dawn to dusk, that we would place underneath that. Falls within standard regulatory type signing, easily recognizable.
Thank you.
Jane, did you have something?
No, I was just going to comment that there was a photograph of such a sign, bright red on white, in the last packet, I think it was.
Yeah, I think so.
At the last meeting, Ann, you and I have already talked about this, but I'm going to ask it just so you have a chance to speak to others about it. We talked about the possibility of marking somehow where signs might be so that we could have a sense of what the frequency of signs would be. Can you speak to where we are on that?
It hasn't happened. I apologize, but the weather got the better of me. Let's see, snow, ice, and rain, not very conducive to marking things in the field. So I do apologize for that. But we do have a period of time. A couple of days ago, I did make a quick trip, partially on East Mercer and mostly on the section of North Mercer between Sherwood Drive and Fortuna. And what sort of off the cuff, what I'm thinking is every second, every third power pole is a pretty reasonable spacing. Gives us enough distance in between a first sign and a second sign so that people can actually see the signs between driveways or where they might park. If you're traveling down East Mercer Way on some of those outside curves, fortunately, I think there are power poles that are right at the top of that curve, and that would be an ideal place to post a sign. So, when you're driving those roadways and you're sort of looking at power poles, that would be an approximate spacing. You and I had also talked that when, over the next couple of weeks, when we do get around to marking sign locations, that in addition to marking them with paint, we could install, post, drive, like surveying stakes or irrigation type flags along the edge of the pavement so that it's a little more visual to be able to see where those signs would be placed. So
in the next couple of weeks, you're thinking sometime before the next hearing on this?
That would be in 2 weeks, and I'll do my best.
Okay.
If it doesn't snow or rain or too heavily or no more ice storms, we should be good.
All right. Well, and I think our sense has been that it needn't be all of it, but at least if we had a stretch to look at, it would be helpful.
Right.
Okay. Tom?
Just to clarify also, the parking restrictions are on the pavement solely, correct? Not on the dirt area?
Correct.
So with that and the placement of the signs, we should make sure that we're not posting a sign in an area that then prevents someone from parking on that shoulder area by having the sign directly in the middle of a parking space.
Right. We have a couple of examples that we had signed in the last couple of years. These again are on East Mercer Way. On the inside of the curve where we do have a lot of gravel shoulder behind the pavement, the paved area, we've posted signs sort of at the beginning of the curve and the end of the curve, leaving ample room for a vehicle to pull off onto the gravel area without hitting the sign or feeling like they can't maneuver around the signs. So that would be the same approach we try to take for the rest of the island.
Mike?
And at our last meeting, we had closed out a project, and we had the discussion about when we could anticipate having those signs put in place. Could you speak to that, please?
The permanent signing?
No, we closed out a section where we had added additional pavement.
Clint's project.
And the project, as part of the project, it included the signs. And so we gave it kind of a grace period to extend that. Can you give us some date certain when we can anticipate those signs being installed?
Well, that would be, that section of paved shoulder would be included with the rest of this. It all has to be part of the same ordinance and the same process. So once...
That was not my understanding of the discussion.
Mike,
I apologize, I wasn't at that meeting, so I'm not...
I thought it was my understanding that we had said we're moving forward on the overall project. Let's not try and break this into two pieces. But I may be misremembering, and if others don't recall it that way, then...
I think we did acknowledge that the commitment had been made when we did the shoulder widening project that those signs would be done at the same time as the project.
Right.
And then since then, the council made the decision to do all of the Mercer ways where there's shoulder widening. And so I guess my recollection of what happened at the meeting was we acknowledged that there actually were two sets of signs being dealt with here. As a practical matter, the staff has just merged them together just as the timing, it wouldn't anymore. It wouldn't make any sense to have it at different times. But the council was right to point it out. I think Councilmember Grouse pointed it out, and that was accurate. We should have put in those signs a month ago.
So
it probably is a good thing that we didn't, because a month ago I probably would have installed no parking anytime signs. The restriction that you're talking about is different than that. And if we had installed the signs, we would have had to take them out and replace them with a different sign. And the spacing would probably have been different. We would have approached that without having privilege of the conversation that we've had over the last month or so. We would have approached the signing for that new section of paved shoulder differently than we're approaching the signing for the Mercer Ways at this point.
I appreciate your positive attitude on that. However, let me get back to my original question.
Okay.
So it's my understanding now we have a template, and
Yes.
that is ready to go to print. So what I'd like to have is some date certain when I can expect those signs to be installed on the project that we closed out, because we did kind of a wink when we closed out that project, and I'd like us to be legal, and I'd like us to have those signs installed at some date certain.
Is it fair, though, to say that really is a question for council at the moment, because we've agreed to lump that sign placement together with this other sign placement work? I ask it as a question. I don't say it as a statement.
maybe it's more a question for Katie. If we just were to drop those signs in right now without an ordinance, could you enforce that?
No.
That's what I thought you'd say.
Okay. So when will the signs, because I have a bracket of time here, February to April 12th. So do we have?
I believe the schedule that we, that you would have seen at the last council meeting where we talked about this topic, the signing and the placement of signing would occur over the next, get my dates right, over the next month. All signs would be in place by mid-April, and enforcement would begin May 1st.
So
that is the schedule that we are committed to. Pardon me?
So for sure by April 12th.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn, could I trouble you with a question about the folks we heard from, gentleman we heard from who said he didn't get a notice? Can you hypothesize why that might have been, or give us some estimation of whether we've got it covered?
Ann mentioned to me after he spoke that she's aware of his concern. He's on the spreadsheet. A letter should have gone to his address.
Okay.
I don't know why he would not have received one.
Okay. So at least we have confidence that the system should have.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of the audience, our intent was to get this mailing to anyone who would have an interest in this proposed restriction. We weren't trying to exclude any areas. We were trying to be very inclusive in the mailing.
Although, as I mentioned to the mayor, since we are not going to be adding no parking signs along that portion of North Mercer Way that has had the widened shoulders, did we notify the North Mercer affected property owners? So that affects a lot of that 1,400 waterfront owners, or 1,100, or whatever that number is.
Correct. The 1,400 was actually, I think it was like 1,499, were the numbers in the affected area. So with the map that was included in the agenda packet, you go uphill and downhill.
It's primarily East and West Mercer Way, though.
Primarily East and West Mercer Way, a little bit of North Mercer Way, but anybody who would be affected by this particular restriction at this time. So those folks on North Mercer Way that are in that area east of the Rowan, no, do I have my directions right? Would not have been included in that mailing. Now, if and when the council chooses to restrict parking along there, we would do the same sort of announcement to those property owners as well at that time.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have one.
I'm sorry. I know it's frustrating as an audience member to be in this position, and unfortunately it is the protocol of the council meetings that we control the conversation at this point, and the audience is the audience. So
I feel like I'm getting left out.
I hear you, and I respect that. I understand your frustration. That's the reason that we do have the public comment period, and we've had two of those this evening.
I want to ask the question is, who's sponsoring this? Who wants this? I know no one that we want. Who's the sponsor? What's the background lobbying you guys to do this?
Yeah, so
that's what I want to ask. No.
So as we bring it back to council, it'll be evident whether there's support or not on the part of council for that. So, and I am bringing it back to council now for discussion. So, discussion or a motion?
Do you need a motion?
I don't know. Do I need a motion? That's a good question. I don't.
I can make one up.
This is just a first reading. It's for feedback to staff for any modifications to the ordinance that you might want to see. And based on whatever feedback you give, we will come back on March 5th with a final ordinance for second reading and adoption.
I think it looks just fine. Thank you.
I'd like to point out a couple of things, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Okay. For one thing, we have two new council members who were not present at the November 7th meeting when this agenda bill was first presented. They might not realize that the staff recommended against doing this ordinance. the experts on our city staff recommended against it. They said staff recommends no formal program to restrict parking on the paved shoulders. They want to monitor what they saw as particular, very discrete problems in certain areas. So I think we would here be going against the recommendation of our real traffic engineers. And I am not in favor of this ordinance. I have been against it from the beginning. I have not heard a hue and cry that we need this ordinance, for one thing. It seems like a sledgehammer approach to something we could handle with a feather. There are some problem areas, but I feel that signage could handle those problem areas. For the scientists on our council, I don't see any data supporting this, that we need this. There are no metrics, no data. If we are going to prohibit daytime parking on improved shoulders, we should look at all the rest of Mercer Island. There's plenty of bicyclists on other roadways that have improved shoulders, and there's no parking prohibition. In fact, the serious bicyclists will be unaffected by this because they tend to ride their bikes in the roadway anyway. Even this ordinance on the east, west, and a little bit of North Mercer ways is inconsistent because it does not apply to all of the island. I happen to live on North Mercer Way, but I am in the little section that will not have restricted parking because of the Roanoke and the VFW. No one wants to mess around with the daytime parking there. So I happen to be lucky to live in this area where my parking would not be restricted. But if we're going to be consistent, we should restrict parking everywhere. I think it's not someplace we want to go. And I also think there'd be incredible sign blight. 100 signs all around, it's ugly enough anyway. I point to the one section on West Mercer Way, just south of West Mercer Elementary. There's about 6 signs. It's a very short stretch. It's too many signs. It's a waste of money. I am against this. I think we could just abandon this, or direct staff to really monitor the problem areas which they have identified. There's really not a big problem here. I would urge my council members to back off.
Okay. Others? Debbie?
Yeah, first I'd like to express my thanks to Councilmember Braun for recognizing that not all of us were here, and there's been a number of issues tonight that have really caught my attention, and I think you heard me mention, first of all, wanting to understand where those school bus stops are, because those of us who know what it is to be a dark, cold, rainy morning and people drive their kids to the school bus. I'm fortunate I live across the street from a school bus, but I see it happening. The way that I'm going to look at this is to hopefully take some time, or plan to take some time, and look at, ultimately, to me, what are the safety issues, and that is safety issues for the pedestrians, for the cyclists, and also the impact on the residents. To the point that several of the audience have made, on First Hill, we actually self-imposed no parking on 72nd Avenue Southeast. And in fact, I live on 72nd Avenue Southeast and was proactive. The no parking actually was implemented at the request, based on a petition, based on safety concerns. The east side of the road has essentially no parking for those of us who are resident there. But having personally been inconvenienced, play groups during the day, Y guides at night, book groups, any of the help that you bring into your home, etc., I still, every day, look at those no parking signs and realize it's keeping parents, children, cyclists, a lot of the seniors are less physically able, out of harm's way on what is a collector arterial. So again, I do want to recognize, and I will be looking into, I think, some of the methodology and data issues that Jane raises, but also I do live in that environment. I do recognize the inconvenience, but I also know that our residents, both cyclists, pedestrians, and less physically able, are safe as they work their way and walk their way and ride their way through the neighborhood.
Thank you. Mike?
Jane, as the code scientist on the panel, I appreciate your concern for data. I would, however, point you back to the legislative history of the funding for these projects. And it goes back many years, well prior to you joining the council. Both Dan and I spent a lot of time ensuring that this money was dedicated for this particular reason, because as one of our former council members used to remind us frequently, public safety is our #1 priority. And this is all about public safety. And it's not just about pedestrians and bicyclists. It's also about people driving cars, trucks, et cetera, around the island. Because I've got many an experience that I've shared with the council in the past where we've had conflicts and have had no bailout opportunities because we didn't have any shoulders. And we had a sharp drop-off. And thanks to the foresight of people like Dan and others on the council, we now have significant stretches of pavement which are safe. And I can attest to that, having biked around the island frequently, and have had very close contacts with FedEx trucks, et cetera. And were it not for that shoulder, it'd be a different story for me and many other walkers and cyclists. So. Again, I'd point you to the legislative history because that really sets the stage for where we are today. Thank you.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, I echo Mike's comments on this. We started this project in 2002, and it was one of the most significant initiatives that this council has taken on over the last now 10 years. And we have been going at this piece by piece and adding to it as funds were available. It was all started in recognition of the fact that the situation we had on the Mercers was untenable from a public safety standpoint, and as Mike has said, it wasn't just the bicyclists, it wasn't just the pedestrians, it was the motorists as well who were getting caught in situations where they could not avoid bicyclists or pedestrians and also avoid oncoming cars, creating serious issues. So we started this project, and we did it to promote safety. We did not do it to build a parking strip. And I can assure you that if anyone had said to the council whenever these projects were approved that we were spending hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to build a parking strip, we would never have built one of these. Not a single one. And to think that now we might have gone through all this effort to end up with a parking strip, even a limited parking strip, to me would be so frustrating, given the effort that has been made both by council and staff to make this possible. I fully understand what is said by the people who have testified tonight, and I understand that any restriction creates an inconvenience. But these strips did not exist before this city put them in within the past 10 years, with possibly the one exception referred to between 72nd and 74th, which I don't know the history of either. But I do happen to know that's in a very sensitive area in terms of bicycling coming down that hill, because you're going at a high speed, and it's a perfect place to have some area to pull off of in case you got cars coming in both directions. So I'm sympathetic to that strip, but it happens to be exactly the kind of place you'd want a shoulder to be. Jane, I hear what you're saying, and the people have testified. I've heard everything that's been said. I just have to re-emphasize with the council and others that this is why we put these shoulders in. It's the only reason we put these shoulders in, and we can't ignore that. We can't. That was the basis upon which we acted year after year after year.
Tom, anything to say? Yeah.
As one of the new ones who wasn't here in November, I'm taking all of this in and listening and looking forward to driving along those very specific routes that people mentioned and the designated areas. As someone who lives right along Island Crest Way and know even walking, riding on the sidewalks along a busy street from a public safety point of view is of concern. It's nerve-wracking, and so and driving often to the beach club along East Mercer Way, I also am one of those drivers who very frequently see people with strollers and with their dogs kind of halfway in an entire lane with nowhere else to be walking. So it's not that they're not walking safely, they're just walking their street. So I understand that need for some area to be able to pull over and for cars. But I also am listening and hearing from the residents about their concerns. So I look forward to exploring that between now and March 5th and looking in those specific areas.
Okay. Let's see. My own comments would be I certainly hear and have respect for the frustrations that you citizens are sharing with us. Thank you for coming and doing that. I am a runner who uses East Mercer and a biker who uses all three Mercers. So I am familiar with the interaction that PEDs and bikes have with the vehicles out there. And I'm also familiar with the fact that there are a fair number of spots where there is no shoulder and there's still folks happily parking in those areas, especially at the belly of the curves. We haven't changed that situation. But I can say, as somebody who runs northbound on East Mercer and uses that shoulder, that it's scary using that shoulder when cars are coming, even having the shoulder. And the thought of having a vehicle parked in that shoulder and forcing me into the street is extremely unpleasant thought. So I share the sense that there is a safety issue here and that this is something that we, especially having spent as much money as we have to accomplish this improvement for all users of our roadways, are doing a wise thing to protect the safety of our different users. So with these various statements...
comment?
Okay.
May I?
You may.
Going around again. Just something I forgot to mention.
We're not going around again just yet, but go ahead.
Oh.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is we've all sort of made little speeches here, and which is fine, but we've avoided the real issue of the moment, which was to give staff feedback on any changes we wanted to see in this, so that they could bring it back to us in the next council meeting with whatever changes we'd like to see. So that was what I was going to tee up as the next point. If you wanted to continue little speeches, you may, or you can...
Not a speech, just a thing I forgot to point out. To be completely safe, we should have a roadway, a bike lane, and a sidewalk. That is impossible on the Mercer Ways. They were built in 1915. And also even, it's not like Debbie's Street, because there's shoulder space on both sides of the street. Where on 72nd, at least it's flat and there's room on both sides. But when you've got ravines, it's more so than a ravine. So anyway, I'm just saying the topography is different. Also, there's, we should sign north on 72nd, then north of 24th, to be consistent all the way up. We should. Okay, well.
Touché.
Yeah, I mean, one gentleman mentioned we should have common sense. I think there are some blind corners and some definite problem areas where cars should not park at any time. But I think to sign the whole island and prohibit parking all the way around all the time, I mean, an occasional person might have friends over in the afternoon for an hour. I think to prohibit that on occasion when there's not a chronic problem is overkill.
I'll take more of those speeches if you want to make them, or we can go back to trying to give staff some feedback, whatever you'd like.
I'm not going to get into it in depth, but as you were talking about the ravines and the cliffs and the lack of pavement, I thought you were going to make the very argument that this ordinance was a really good idea.
Tom?
Just on the staff direction, in the final reading or the second reading, if we could include the sign, what the signs will look like, so that we can do it all in one motion or one place. Or
We can bring that information for you. It won't be in the ordinance, of
we
course.
say what it will say on the signs, just for
Sure.
just for complete.
We can do that. It's typically not what you'd put in the ordinance. Well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that. I'll check with the attorney who will let us know. But in any case, we will have a mock-up of the sign for you to look at.
Any other feedback?
And
Debbie?
I just like to receive the email or otherwise put a request outside.
Okay.
I think right now.
Go ahead.
And maybe November's packet or whatever was sent to the council at that first reading, that could be sent to me and Debbie.
the November original, when the council made the policy decision that we're going to do this, sure, we'd be happy to.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I guess I'd like to make one last comment, and then I'll wrap this up. And that's a comment to the folks who are here tonight and passionate about this issue. I would ask you to please pat yourselves on the back for coming out and speaking and being passionate about this and involved. It takes engaged citizenry to run a city, and so thank you for doing that. I do want you to recognize we also take email input. We've had a fair bit of that on. I've had some on both sides of this issue. And I know, speaking for myself, and I'm sure speaking for my fellow council members, it is our job to be the council of 23,000 people. And that sometimes aligns with a passionate audience that comes out and sometimes does not. And so don't feel, I would advise, don't feel that somehow we haven't listened if we haven't reacted in the way you wanted us to react to your specific concerns. And the last point I'd make is, and we do have some time here between now and the next meeting, and if you'd like to communicate with us further, you're certainly welcome to do that.
Bruce, you can, in furtherance of that point, a lot of the exceptions already in this ordinance are based upon previous public input. So the exceptions for dealing with the whole idea of dawn to dusk was based upon public input. The whole idea of special events came out of public input. Discussion and inclement weather, and construction. So this is not we're not sitting up here in a vacuum. The first variation on this had very little of that in there. So this has gone through several meetings of this council, and we've gotten to this point as a result of those meetings.
So with that, thank you everybody who has participated in that issue. We move on now to the last-minute agenda bill that was added, Agenda Bill 4709, Letter of Support for Motor Vehicle Excise Tax and Transportation Benefit District. Rich, you want to tee this up for us? You want? Okay. I can give you my copy if you like.
As the agenda bill says in the cover email that I sent to the council this afternoon, this is an item that came up literally over the weekend. In Olympia, things move fast. The Senate adopted a bill last week that concerned local authority for transportation funding, and the House Transportation Committee was hearing that particular bill this afternoon. In the time period from last week till over this last weekend, there has been a flurry of activity going on among cities, particularly within King County, but other cities across the state, and with counties, in our case a lot with King County, about possible modifications of the bill to meet the needs of cities and counties. So we had been requested over the weekend to, if we were so inclined, to weigh in on Mercer Island's interest with regard to this bill. The draft letter of support that you see in the agenda packet is the product of conversations and information that came to us from both King County and some of our other sister cities around King County, as well as input from and discussions between the mayor, deputy mayor, and myself. Let me see if I can summarize what's going on. It appears that there's a broad strategy in Olympia as the state is trying to balance its budget. It is, with one hand, it is, I think the word they use, scrubbing state shared revenues with local government. Those revenues that over the years have been provided to cities and counties to do certain things are being pulled back into the state budget to help cover their huge hole. And at the same time, the state is considering giving local governments new authority to generate revenue to make up for that lost state shared revenue. The way that's playing out in transportation is giving cities and counties, or at least they're considering, new authority in implementing, in this case, 3 new taxes. A modification of an existing one, and actually it's a fee, not a tax. It's the vehicle license fee. Under the Transportation Benefit District authority that already exists, cities can impose a $20 per vehicle fee for transportation purposes by a vote of the City Council. Senate Bill 6582 would increase that from $20 to $40. And then this bill goes further to allow, if approved, counties to impose motor vehicle excise tax up to 1% of the value of vehicles. And right now, as the bill stands, it would be imposed only upon voter approval, but there are lots of negotiations and discussions by the counties to make that authority a council-voted decision as well. And then lastly, the bill would allow for county imposition of a 1, 2, or 3 cent gas tax for transportation purposes. So between the three the funding sources, it could generate a significant amount of funds. What drives most of the demand for these funds is transit, because of the huge cuts that transit has had to take, coming from the downturn in the economy, voter-approved initiatives that cut various funding sources, and the state's trying to provide a mechanism to replace them. We do not have a transportation benefit district currently, although in my budget message a year ago, November, I teed that concept up. Council chose not to go there. I still believe it's an excellent way of addressing underfunded and unfunded transportation needs that we still face. And the new authority that the state might provide in this bill not only sustains that, but it expands it. So we have drafted a letter, it's Exhibit 1, that supports these various notions. It supports the expansion to $40 per vehicle. It supports county imposition of a motor vehicle excise tax, and it supports county imposition of a gas tax if the county so chooses it. This is all about supporting the authority to do it, not necessarily the doing of it. It's somewhat different than the discussions going on in some of our sister cities, which have been advocating for a funding distribution formula in the statute, so that the counties, for example, would get 60% of the revenues from a motor vehicle excise tax, and cities would then divvy up the remaining 40%. Our letter of support does not say that. It just simply says that the distribution would be worked out by cities within a county by interlocal agreement prior to imposition of the tax. In other words, we're not taking a position on the distribution formula, at least not proposing it here. As late as this afternoon, meetings were occurring in Olympia on some compromise language. Mr. Mayor, would you think this is a good time to try to go over that, just to give a flavor of, or should we just stop for a minute and let people...
Why don't we stop, digest,
All right.
talk a little bit about this, and if there are questions specifically to that, we'll come back to it, because I think there may be a digesting moment.
I will comment that the timing issues. The House Transportation Committee, chaired by Representative Cliburn, met this afternoon and held a hearing. There will be additional discussions through the rest of this week, including meetings with mayors from around the state to work out language and some of these compromises on funding distributions. That will happen later this week. This stuff moves fast. If we just decided, well, let's all think and talk about this and decide it at our March 5th meeting, I think this will have come and gone by then. So if Mercer Island's going to weigh in, I believe you need to do that, decide that tonight.
Thank you, Rich. And if I could just, what I'll do is add on for a moment to that. You know that I'm, of course, very new in this job I'm in, and struggling to figure out how to bring issues that I'm being asked about from outside to you, and do it in a way that's suitable for you and works for all of us. And in fact, I'm tagging you with 3 different approaches tonight. One is bringing it to you in this bill, this letter. Second was, of course, just announcing that I was taking a position with regards to the mayor's set of principles, and we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. And then the third is bringing something to you just during the planning session as a sort of a yay or nay brief discussion. So I'm trying to figure it out, and ideally what comes out of it is some sort of a procedure going forward where I and you are on the same page and there's no surprises as to what's happening. This one is arising out of the fact that I've been participating in some mayor's meetings that were put together by Mike McGinn to pull mayors from around the state together and talk about the importance of giving cities and counties more authority over ways to raise income, raise revenues. And the principles package, or the principles letter that was put together was more of a broad statement. This gets down to the actual Senate bill that's in progress at the moment, and there was a feeling that there was no way that could be handled in a broader letter with lots of parties involved at that level. Although, Rich, I think some number of cities did, in fact, all sign on to, or were intending to sign on to a letter which we opted not to try and sign on to because they needed to have that go today.
14 cities within King County did sign on to a letter that went this afternoon to the committee.
Yeah. So we opted not to do that because it would have been, again, me trying to take a position without your input. So, but what we've heard from our lobbyists and others in Olympia is that this represents an opportunity, and a rare opportunity from the state house's perspective, for cities and counties to have more control over their futures. And the feeling there was that we could all get into wrestling with each other over the details of this, but what's really needed right now is for cities and counties to all say, good idea, if we feel that way, and make sure that our elected representatives in Olympia understand that this is something that we care about and would like to see them act on. So with that, I bring it to you and would welcome your input on whether it's the right thing for us to do or not. So with that, Mike?
Thanks. Thanks, Bruce. I've been a big fan of this because of the way it targets funds at the local level. I guess my only question is, are we okay moving this forward given the limited amount of public notice for this particular agenda item?
Yeah, I guess that's for you guys to decide. All this does is, all that you're being asked here is whether or not you're going to communicate to the legislature your preferences or support or not. I mean, we all know that in how the legislature moves, the ability for us to go out and do the public hearings that they're doing themselves, it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean that. I just...
It's a rhetorical question almost.
It is, yeah. Sorry. So I fully support it. I've got a couple minor editorial things, but they don't warrant discussion at the dais. Thank you.
Other input? Donna?
Just, I guess, kind of a point of information, and I guess that's supplied here, and just wanted to publicly mention that regardless of our action tonight, if this passes and then King County decides to impose a 1%, to take some of these actions and impose a 1% tax, Mercer Island stands to gain $676,000 in revenue just by the King County action, even if we do not act.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to give you a slightly different set of numbers because as the day went on, there was some refinements of that, and we're going to have to bracket it exactly how the computations work. One source of speculation on what a 1% MVET would generate in King County is folks down at the King County itself, 120 million countywide. And if you start there, and if you were to end up with a 60-40 split, again, that's a big if, because that would be something that have to be either worked out or put in the statute. But if that's what were happening, it would be about $676,000 to Mercer Island. Another source said the 120 was probably a bit optimistic, and a more likely number, more lower end, would be 80 million countywide. If that turns out to be accurate, and a slightly lower computation of Mercer Island's population as a percentage of countywide population that I was given later today, that 60-40 split would reduce down to 438,000. So I'm sort of bracketing the low end, as best I can tell today, about 440,000. At the high end, if you did a 50-50 split, and there's 120 million countywide, we could be upwards of 848. So there's quite a bit of room there. A lot's going to have to be known before the county would actually impose this, obviously.
Jane?
And our use of those funds would be restricted to transportation infrastructure?
It's actually transportation, but fairly broadly defined. It includes maintenance, construction, planning, transit, roads, bridges. I mean, it's pretty broadly defined. Parking, yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot you can do with it. You know, the things that I thought of during the budget cycle last go-round that I thought this might be a good tool to look at is safe routes to school program, implementing our bicycle pedestrian plan. We had talked about some kind of locally run service that would do transit from the south end to the north end to connect up to the town center and the park and ride lot. That's a transit service we could pay for. I mean, there's lots of parking. We've talked about Mercer Island only parking in some structure. If you want to have your own controlled parking, you'll have to pay for it out of local funds. All of these are things that you could do with the source of funds. Debbie?
Based on Tana's question, which I think was, Councilmember Sam's question, it was an excellent one, and that is whether we send it in or not, and they vote. We will, the authority to tax will probably, or the vote to tax will not sit exclusively or even substantially with us. Would it be appropriate to understand then that we'll be looking at the total budget impact of the state's decision to pull back funding during the course of the budget planning? Because I look and I see that we stand to gain between 400 and some odd thousand and 600 and some odd thousand, but we're going to be losing from a different bucket or buckets.
Yes.
Before we go and allocate this money to these other justifiably great programs, I want to make sure we're covering our core budgetary requirements.
Sure. It's great point and question to ask, and the answer is yes. We'll have to look at all of this in the context of the biggest picture. What I said about the apparent state strategy to bring back state-shared revenues to the state and then give the local governments the authority for new taxation. On the transportation side, I think what they're assuming, and it's probably true almost everywhere in the state, on transportation, that most cities and counties are putting general fund dollars into their transportation programs because they just don't have enough transportation-related revenue to get everything done. So this is by putting new transportation funding authority back to cities and counties, it'll free up general fund dollars that will supplant or refill what the state's taken away from them. This is sort of, we'll give you transportation authority, but we're going to take back your liquor profits.
Are the same?
And in most cities, it'll work because the general fund has been the place where the balancing act has happened. With Mercer Island, that's not so true because we are almost in equilibrium on the transportation side with state transportation funds that we get, gas tax being the largest one, to fund our street needs. Where we run into problem is doing anything beyond our basic residential streets and arterial streets. The list of things I just said, we don't have general fund dollars, nor do we put general fund dollars into the street fund. We don't have any dollars there that will get freed up. So I can see what the state's doing. It probably doesn't work out the same way for us as it does most cities. I bet none of that made sense because
It sounded good.
It's a bit of a shell game that the state's doing, and we don't play in that game.
Yeah, I guess, my basic concern is that we're going to find ourselves with, let's just call it in $500,000 in transportation, but we're going to be $800,000 short overall from the general fund and the liquor taxes, etc. TBD, I would assume.
I don't know what the numbers will be. I don't think it'll be that large. But we may still find a general fund shortfall. If they take $300,000 of liquor profits, CHIP's going to have to find that somewhere. And it probably won't be out of the transportation fund. It'll have to be somewhere else. I think we're still pretty inoculated from the impacts of the state because we don't rely that heavily on state shared revenue.
Debbie, one clarification I'd offer, and Rich, correct me if I've got this wrong, but as I understand it, so there are three different things. There's the motor vehicle, the MVET, there's the cab fees, and the gas tax. And gas tax is aimed at county only, but the other two are, as I understand it, being targeted at both cities and counties at this point. So one or the other could participate at that level. So when you said wouldn't be our decision, it might be our decision as to whether we wanted to proceed into those.
And the other thing that's at play is the decision whether or not to make them voter approved or council approved. The license fee will, as I understand it, will stay council authority up to $40. The motor vehicle excise tax, right now the Senate bill says voter approved, and there's heavy lobbying going on by all sides to make that council approved. And if the county council were to get that authority countywide, then your scenario would be exactly right, that the county would impose it and we would receive the funds, regardless of what if we wanted them or not, they'd be coming.
So, Dan? If I understand the agenda, Bill, if the county does the 1% MVET, we would still have the option of doing in addition, the $40 fee, up to $40 fee? Is that the way it works?
I checked that as well. The Senate bill as it stands right now is written so it's either or. If the county imposes the 1% MVET, cities would not have the authority to do the license fee. The House bill that is still active and alive, as I understand it, did allow for the two to be independent and sort of run parallel. The cities and the counties are both lobbying the House and Senate to have that provision incorporated into the Senate bill. So I think everybody affected by this is saying you got to give us the maximum latitude here because not every county is, it's not cookie cutter relationships between the cities and counties across the state. Of course, that would be something we would very much support. We want to have a license authority regardless of what the county does with the MVET so that you guys would get to make that choice. So that provision is incorporated in the support letter that we would urge maximum flexibility for both the MVET and the license fee.
Other questions or a motion if someone wants to make one? Go ahead, Mike.
Because I work in the transportation arena a lot, this makes a lot of sense from a statewide perspective, because when you look over the next 5 to 10 years at the gap in funding and the degradation in the highway infrastructure, both bridges and roads, by far and away the largest gap is at the local level. And if you look at the federal budgets, particularly starting in 2013, they are just taking a nosedive. So cities and towns in particular are really going to be strapped to find ways to replace failing bridges, failing roads all across the landscape. So this is one way, and next year you'll see other ways. I mean, coming down the pike in the not-too-distant future is tolling everywhere. So to what extent we can at least get some handle locally on some funding mechanisms that have some flexibility, we should be doing that.
That's a great point. What we rely so heavily on coming from the state is the gas tax, and the gas tax just is not performing like it used to because cars are more fuel efficient, people are driving less miles, and so the revenues are very, very flat when our construction costs continue to climb. So eventually someone's got to pay the piper. There will not be enough revenue unless some new authority exists.
Building on Mike's point, I think some communities are very strapped, and even if, and Rich's point, and even if we don't necessarily choose to use this, if we have the authority, I think it's one of those times. In fact, when we had the interview for this position, someone, I think it might have been Mike, asked what's one policy that you've supported that is kind of beyond Mercer Island, or benefiting Mercer Island. And I think this is one of those policies that it's important to give other communities as many tools as possible. It might not fit with for our community, but there are lots of local governments that are going to be very hit by all the state cuts and don't have a reserve and aren't in as good financial shape, and giving them the tools and the options to at their disposal, I think, is very important. Similarly, I would support the Councilmanic Authority on that point, in that if it required voter approval, it would be a significant delay in timing. That for those communities where they needed to impose a fee or a tax now to get that revenue to continue through in the correct budget cycle, waiting for voter approval could be a timing issue that would be untenable for their budget. So I'd be supportive of this in this letter and that provision.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'm hoping for a motion.
I would move. Is there a motion? Move to approve the letter of support for local transportation funding options as presented.
Okay, discussion? Go ahead.
Point of clarification, in terms of editing, do we do that now or after it's approved? Or
well, now is the right time.
Now is a good time, particularly if it's substantive editing. And I'll ask for one indulgence. If you give me some latitude tomorrow morning to keep all the substance exactly the same, but kind of rearrange the letter and its wording a little bit so that it doesn't look quite so much like the other city's letter that I drafted off of, I think they'll appreciate that.
Plagiarism.
They said, just to be sensitive, Rich, can you kind of jazz it up a little bit to make it look more like a Mercer Island letter? I said I'd be happy to do it if my counsel lets me do that.
So we'll make the motion in substance as presented.
Okay. All right. Any other?
Can you change that so the motion is?
So what I would suggest is, since we're keeping the substance, do you have a substantive change?
I'm not sure, and I'm not sure. So you can, I'll make an amendment if necessary. Okay. Just clarifying in paragraph 3, saying that we're aware that King County is interested in the 1%, and then mentioning the Councilmanic. I think I would like us to support the Councilmanic Authority, and so if that says it there, great. In that last sentence, if it seems kind of vague, I would like to.
Yeah, no, I know where I see where it is. I'm trying to see whether do we say it.
You just It is
say it
vague,
again.
so if you want to say, I mean, that is a substantive change, which is...
So I would make an amendment to the motion to add the substantive change of being clear about the councilmanic authority.
So the first sentence of the fourth paragraph.
No, just, so you can...
I know she's talking about there, but...
The last sentence of the third paragraph, instead of just saying we're aware, you say we support King County's interest.
Right. He actually says that in the first paragraph.
That's what I'm saying. In the first sentence of the fourth paragraph, we say we support the MVET component of the bill with councilmanic authority.
I see. You're right. It does say that.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. You're right. You're right.
Okay. Then, no.
Okay. Mike?
Rich, I just have an editorial issue with the very last sentence. And it doesn't change the substance. It's just a very confusing last sentence.
Yeah, I know. I struggled with that. How about I just rework the paragraph to get those points? I don't like it all that much either. It's the we also urge you to. It would have been a really long sentence if I didn't break it up. So.
All right. I think I hear a growing consensus here. Any other comments? All right. All in favor of approving the letter of support in
substance as presented.
In substance as presented for local transportation funding options. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No? No. So that passes unanimously.
And I'm sure Mike would have voted in favor of it all.
All right.
I will draft this.
Yes.
I will redraft this up and then send it out first as soon as I can tomorrow to Judy and the committee, and then I'll copy you all with it. But you won't see it again before it goes out.
That's right. Yeah, he's a little queasy with that umbrella trick. Okay. So we move now to other business. Council member absences.
Move to excuse council members.
There's a bit of bitterness here. Do we have a second? All right. All in favor of approving the absence of Councilmember Ciro? Signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, that passes. Any upcoming absences? Other than those listed. All right. Planning schedule, Rich, you want to talk about, you've started to fill things in?
Well, no more than our last meeting. We have our retreat scheduled with our management team next week, and so we'll fill out the rest of the year then. So just keep your eye on March. I don't have any suggestions for changes. That's what I'm planning to do. And then we'll show you a whole bunch more by your March 5th meeting. I hope to be able to show you a whole lot more.
Okay. Any council member comments on the planning schedule at this point? Okay. Board appointments, we have none.
Hey, Rich, I'm just curious, on the town center ground floor regulations item on March 5th, is the intention to come with a proposal from staff, or is it to just, again, lay out the issues for the council to give guidance on, or do you know what Tim's planning?
Yeah, Tim actually gave me a draft of the agenda bill since he's out of town this week, and I just scanned it. I haven't really looked at it carefully, but it looks to me like there's a proposal in there. It's around the definitions. I think he's going to come talk to you about how we define retail.
I understand that. I'm hoping that he or someone is going to be prepared to provide information on why this problem seems to be limited to a few buildings, and what happened to the tenants in one building in particular who all seem to have gone away.
Okay. I think I can read the code for that.
Anything else, planning schedule-wise? Okay. Board appointments, as I said, there are none. We come to council member reports. Mike, you want to begin?
Just briefly, I'm going to be on a national call on Friday, stepping in for Mayor McGinn for the region on electric vehicle deployment in the Seattle area. And so I'll send you the information on it for those that may be interested. Feel free to pass it on.
Great. Anything else? No? Okay, Debbie? All right, Tana?
This past week, we had our utility board meeting, and just wanted to mention two things I found very interesting from there. First, I guess mostly for the audience, people probably know that Mercer Island buys its water in advance from Seattle Public Utilities and then sells it to Mercer Island residents. Last year, I just wanted to point out that we bought 3.5% more than we sold, and this is remarkably low systems loss. Anything below a 10% differential is considered great, and it's the lowest we've been in some time. So I just wanted to point that out and to mention that Terry Smith, our utilities operations manager, did a great job on that. And that, of course, saves the city money by being very efficient in our water use. So that was great. I also wanted to mention that in a bid to improve customer service, the city is now offering residents an e-billing option for the city water bill. And that is great. And people should be getting information in their bills in the next cycle as their bills appear. So I thought that was also a great customer service improvement. So thank you to everyone involved in that.
It's great. We're really proud of it, and we're going to improve it. Even right, Dan?
We are going to improve
Dan's not quite sold yet on how it works. So.
Okay. But it's starting.
It's started. With Bruce, it turns out with Bruce, it started about 5 years ago. He's the only person in the island who's had it.
We could see it coming here, that'd be mayor.
Dan, do you want to give a report? Okay. Jane, why don't you go, and then I'll come back and do myself last.
Yes. Well, I had several meetings. My very first Conservancy Trust meeting, at which I learned that I was actually not just a liaison, but a voting member of the board. Because I was looking back at old minutes, and I thought, Dan keeps voting. What is he doing? How can Dan be voting on all these things? So I was...
Yes, a veto in the UN Security Council.
It's the only board on which a council member can vote, I think.
Well,
anyway, I feel like I have a lot of power now.
Similarly, my experience was I went from the Conservancy Trust, where I was voting, to, I think it was Design Commission. I went to my first Design Commission meeting, and I started voting, and everybody was looking at me like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be voting. So.
And also on February 17th, here in the council chambers, I attended, along with several council members, Tana, for sure, was there for the Mercer Island Police Department annual awards, and there were lots of awards for, well, all sorts of things, but the Supervisor of the Year was Ryan Parr, the Support Employee of the Year, Greg Levinson, and the Officer of the Year happened to be my son-in-law, Michael Vickers. So I was particularly proud to be there with my daughter and granddaughter and to see Michael get this award. So that's my report.
That's a big deal, actually, because it's all voted by the officers.
Let's yes. Yeah, something's fishy in Denmark here.
I asked the mayor...
Chief Holmes, would you mind stepping to the microphone and just give us a quick how the officer awards go and went?
Yes, thank you. Happy to do that. Chief Holmes, your police chief. And we had, as was mentioned, several council members there, and it was nice to have Debbie, Tana, Bruce, and Jane there, and the city manager as well. Other council members sent me emails and were regrettably out of the area or unable to attend. But it's a special event for us where we recognize the Of the Year awards, the supervisor, support employee, and officer. And those awards are particularly special because those are voted on by the other department members. There are a number of awards we give out that command staff look at and we decide, but the Of the Year awards, like I say, are particularly special because all the department members vote on these, and so it's a pleasure to present them, and those recipients this year certainly earned them as they have in the past, and it's just fun to see that and to highlight the good work that gets done by all the members of the police department each year. So.
And the one anecdote about Michael and what may have helped prompt him getting his award?
Other than his
Sammamish?
Yes. While off-duty, Officer Vickers essentially saved or certainly contributed to saving a man's life who had a heart attack, but some significant heart event. Michael, off-duty, recognized the event being a serious one and administered CPR, and he received a letter from the police chief at Sammamish, and Eastside Fire and Rescue also recognized him for his efforts there too. So again, pleasure having him on our staff.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else, Jane? No. Okay. Well, let's see. For my report, first small one, Jane Tana and I all were at a town hall meeting tonight with our new congressional member, Adam Smith, and so that was interesting to have a chance to see him in action. And then let me come to the bigger nut that I've been trying to figure out how to crack, and that is this question of when I get asked, so I didn't realize going into this job that I was going to be asked to be the one who signed letters for the community, but I am. And so as you know, out of this mayor's meeting, I took one approach with you because it was time sensitive and went ahead and sent one in and just informed you of it. I also received a request to sign a letter to the Obama administration about our ocean national ocean policy. And with that one, I didn't think it was of great import to this group, but I did think it was a nice. I did think it was a nice. I did think it was a nice opportunity for us to use it as an example. And so I bring it to you, and I am looking for your thumbs up, thumbs down input on whether this is something I ought to be putting my signature on. So I'm going to pause here and ask for input on this. I get a thumbs up, 2 thumbs up from one spot.
In principle, yes. I think it's hard when you haven't had a chance to read it to know exactly what it is.
Now, it did hit you via email several days ago, I believe.
That's certainly my apology. When we come to the discussion, I'd be interested in if you get it and you have to turn it around in 2 days, you have to turn it around in 4 days, or
Actually,
that works just so.
Yeah, so you're asking for a question. Let me sort of cut to after goofing around with these different approaches, a proposed policy that I came to out of discussion with the city manager and Deputy Dan. And that is this, that mayoral action would essentially, it's going to stick, yes, fall into one of 3 categories. And the first is, if it's an issue already that has been addressed by the council in a form that's substantially close to the form of the letter that's being proposed, in that case, I would take the liberty of going ahead and signing and sending without your further approval. So that's category 1. Category 2, it turns out that in the past, sometime before my time on council, there was a pattern of having a fall legislative discussion amongst council members, teed up by the city manager, with the intent of arriving at some guiding principles for...
It's a legislative agenda. What we care about on items that would be likely to come up in the upcoming session. We used to do that routinely, and then we stopped at the council's request and would urge that we go back to doing that.
Go ahead and tell your ironic story about that. Got to do it.
You really want me to?
Yeah, why not?
The last time I did a legislative agenda to the council, whatever year that was, 2001, 2002, I gave it to the council and got it was a meat grinder, just grilled and chewed out for what in the world are you doing? You can't possibly be serious about city staff going down to Olympia and lobbying for anything. There actually were 2 council members most saying that. One was Council Member Jenke, and the other one was now Senator Litzo,
who in turn, when you went to Olympia...
When I went, within just a month or so, last session, not this one, but the previous session, and met with him, one of the first things he asked me, well, Rich, where's Mercer Island's legislative agenda? All the other cities have one. And I'm sure it never even occurred to him that the disconnect.
There was a bit of irony in that. So point two being that I would propose that we resurrect this idea of a pre-legislative session legislative agenda construction conversation. And out of that would come some principles which then I could operate on as I'm given questions about what our positions are on things. And the third would be, so the third bucket would be new issues, things like this national ocean policy, that if I feel that it's worthy of council consideration, I would bring it to you in the form that it came to you as an email, or in the form that this other one came to you as an actual agenda bill. So and so what I would propose is that it's essentially a policy I would try and operate to. I can tell you Councilmember Ciro was excited about the idea of a policy around this, and it seems like it's a reasonable way for us to proceed. But I'm looking for your feedback in general on this approach, and then also your feedback in specific on this national ocean policy. So wherever you'd like to begin on weighing in on these things, I'm happy to hear it.
A question, would we be able to handle figuring out a legislative agenda like at a study session, or would it take a morning of a retreat, or I don't know. How much time would...
We do it in the fall. It would be September, October of preceding the January session. It'd probably take a couple of meetings, maybe a study session and one other regular business item. It would be done kind of running parallel to when the Association of Washington Cities and perhaps Suburban Cities Association is doing their similar work, because we'll get a lot of help from our fellow lobbyists and cities. It actually isn't a big deal. It's not that hard of a thing to do. Processing it through the council might take a couple of meetings, but it's not hard. Dan?
Yeah, on the issue of the legislative agenda, I think we can try it out and see what happens, and see if we can reach consensus. On things like the Oceans Initiative, which I personally have no issues with, but I'm very leery of going down that road, because I see that as, if we start weighing in on national issues, or even on state issues which don't impact Mercer Island, or international issues, I don't know where it stops. And I see individual council members coming to the council with their pet initiatives, or their very serious causes which they believe in, and asking this council to weigh in on them. Some of them which could be much more complicated than the Oceans Initiative. Now, I don't want to deal with gun control. I don't want to deal with prayer in the schools. I don't want to deal with abortion or any of these other issues which very easily could suddenly be put on our plate, because we're now dealing, we've now moved away from items which are specifically germane to Mercer Island. So I would much prefer that we stay away from non-Mercer Island issues, and I'd much prefer we stay away from non-Mercer Island issues, because I just see us as just opening the door to people raising too many things which can become very divisive in this council.
Okay. Others? Mike?
I agree with Dan that we do somehow need to have a bright line. I will point out, having worked on a number of the policies that are embedded in the ocean policy, we provide habitat for ocean-going species in our backyard. So we do have a direct connection to the ocean in a number of ways. And for that, I gave my 2 thumbs up. But, it is kind of a slippery slope, and I don't disagree with Dan on going down that path. But I think in this case, we have a lot to gain, and we have participated and provided a lot of money toward recovery of listed species that go up and down the coastline all the way to Alaska and back every year. So I think it's a worthy effort and one that we've contributed a lot of hard work toward putting together.
Okay. Others? All right.
This doesn't address the last minute, we got to decide something with a short deadline issue, though. I mean, all of these can be brought to us, in plenty of time to discuss and vote on at a council meeting. But are we going to discuss those situations, or is there a solution for those situations where you need to sign a letter that needs to go out before the next council meeting?
Well, I'm happy to take the input. As I said, I'm
Yeah,
struggling
we just
here
say,
to try and
sorry,
figure out
we have to meet.
what the right approach is, so that I'm not stepping on the toes of you. Because at the end of the day, if I'm signing for the city, it's got to be something that's in alignment with the council.
We talked about that a little bit earlier in the day, and what I said to Bruce at the time is that unless there's clear council guidance that he can infer from prior action, I honestly don't believe the mayor has the authority to take a position on behalf of the council that hasn't been voted on by the council. I just don't think there's anything in state law or city ordinances that
I believe that's correct.
should empower him to do that. So
If it's something that you believe is essential for the city, it's really short turnaround time, it can't wait, and you have to do it, we'll call a special meeting. But unless you can declare an emergency under the RCW and, mayhem breaks out, the asteroid hits, those kinds of things, we can do emergencies, but...
We hope it lands in the ocean. But I'll take that down as a policy.
Short of that, we'll call a special meeting.
Okay. Okay, so let's do specifics. Do I sign or do I not sign this National Ocean Policy letter? Thumbs up, thumbs down on this. The old, I guess this brings us to another issue. The old approach, was the multiple fingers, and we sort of said, let's just do that. Let's just give it to me. You guys are on camera, remember? All right. So I'm looking forward. Do I sign? Do I not sign this ocean letter?
I'm okay with signing it.
Oh, now you guys are just making this tough. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to sign this. Thank you. And the policy otherwise, with James and this other addition, that don't do anything hasty without it being an asteroid.
I agree with Dan that it has to be the main signature.
Okay.
I agree, because I would hate to see us get into kind of partisan politics, sort of big issues that aren't really...
I'm bringing you one next about, Syria and...
No. I know so much about that.
I just raised that because I know if Mike Ciro had been here, it would have been a much more contentious discussion on the ocean policy letter. Because you read that, anything that has Obama's name in it, unless it's a derogatory, he's going to be against. I mean, let's be honest.
Okay, I think I have the input I need, so thank you very much for that. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Because if not, we're about to be adjourned. Okay? Rich, did you have something?
No.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.